Good morning.
Good morning.
Most of what I'm going to be talking about this morning is a story from my childhood and a little bit of the beginning of, I guess, what has been a spiritual journey. But I wanted to start off, I need to do a little survey to know where I'm standing here. Can I ask everybody to raise their right hand? Everybody? Everybody? Okay. Now, I want you to keep your right hand up if you believed in the tooth fairy. Keep your right hand up if you believed in the tooth fairy. Okay. Now I want you to leave your right hand up if you still believe in the tooth fairy. Okay. Oh. I would have to ask you to leave, I'm afraid. Are you good? Okay, I did. I believed in the tooth fairy. I believed in the tooth fairy because when I put my tiny little tooth under the pillow, like my trusting parents and trusted parents told me to, the next morning there was a little note with little tiny writing and there was some money under there. I believed because my parents told me to. And for the most part, they told me the truth. And I believed because as a 5-year-old, I had no better explanation for this magical transformation, and frankly, I liked a quarter or whatever it was, I think it was probably a dime, a whole lot more than the nasty little tooth that I had put under there, so I wanted to believe in the tooth fairy. So I wanted to give you a little history because I had to do some research for this. So it used to be common for parents to bury these teeth in the ground, and they did it out of superstition. They did it because they believed, or some believed, that in order to get the new ones to grow, you had to put the little baby ones in the ground. Others did it to keep the witches away from the teeth, because if a witch got a hold of a tooth, they could put a curse on the child. So as people moved to cities, they couldn't bury them in the ground anymore, so they started putting them in flower pots. And then eventually, like my parents did, they put them in the little tiny box, and they stuck it in the back of the top drawer in their dresser, wherever they did. Anyway, I was probably 5 or 6, maybe 7, when I woke up as my mother had her hand underneath my pillow. And that was the beginning of this spiritual journey that I'm going to tell you about today. So I don't really remember how I reacted. I don't think I did anything. I think I just lay there because I wanted the money. But I do remember trying to figure it all out, and it rocked my world a little bit. And I remember being confused, and I remember being sad about the fact that there was no tooth fairy, that in fact it was my mom the whole time. But I remember vividly taking solace and comfort from the fact that there may not be a tooth fairy, but at least there's an Easter bunny, and there's Santa Claus, and I still have them. So on it went, and my loving parents, they continued to support implicitly all of these mythical characters that seemed to coincide with candy and vacation from school and all of these other great things. And so these were really happy things in my life. But eventually, all the older kids started telling me, no, they don't exist. No, they don't exist. So I asked my mom. I put her on the spot and I said, Mom, I need to know, does he or doesn't he exist? And she said, Tote, do you like the fact that Santa comes down the chimney and leaves all those presents for you on Christmas Day? And I said, yes. And she said, are you sure you want to pursue this line of questioning any further? And we left it at that, and we've never talked about it since. So what was not part of that conversation that day was the big question. Do you believe in God? And for me, because I was raised in the Christian faith, do you believe in Jesus? That was not part of that conversation that day. But what I've come to realize now that I'm sticking little coins underneath pillows and so forth is that it's not those questions. The questions aren't what I'm struggling with, which I do struggle with. I struggle with these questions. It's not the answers that I'm struggling with, it's the question. And so I wanted to explore that a little bit. And I wanted to start off by explaining why I was so ready to believe in the tooth fairy and the bunny and salmon. It's because of the little coins and the little chocolate eggs and the presents. It was evidence. For a 5-year-old brain, I had evidence that these things existed. But when you're told by your parents or others in society to believe in a God, it's hard to find the evidence. Okay? But when I was 5, something happened to me. And the basis of this conversation today, or my talk today, is to tell you what happened to me. And to say this was the beginning of the evidence for me. So I need to, another quick survey. I'm not going to ask you all to raise your hands first. How many of you, when you were kids, had a security item, like a security blanket? Security blanket, little dog, little bear, something? Come on, the third formers aren't the only ones honest. Come on, sixth formers. You guys had, thank you. Okay? All right. I had a security blanket. And my life revolved around the security blanket. I still remember exactly how it smelled and how it felt. I couldn't sleep without it. I was like Linus. I took this thing everywhere, draped over my shoulder, sucking my thumb. So one summer, I lived in Maine, and one summer we went to an island off of the coast of Maine, in Penobscot Bay, if some of you know Maine. It's pretty big water there, big winds, big waves, big tides, like 10-foot tides. And we went to a beach, or, what Maine calls a beach. And we probably dipped our toes in the cold water. And we left, and we had a great time. And then nighttime started to fall. We were back at the house, about half an hour away. The house we were staying in, not our own house. And I realized my security blanket. I had left it on the beach. And my life ended. It was over. Darkness was falling. All my fears were happening. I didn't have my security blanket. And so my mom threw me in the car. We drove back to the beach. Guess what had happened? The tide had come in. And the beach that we had been on all day was gone. My blanket, it was gone. It was gone. So that was one of the worst nights of my life. I didn't sleep. I, was probably crying all night. It was probably the worst night for my mother and my father. We went back the next day. It was gone. And we had to leave. We had to leave the coast of Maine and travel back home. So you got to put yourself in a 5-year-old state of mind. My life had ended. My life had ended. My grandmother, who lived near that beach, or spent the summer near that beach, I don't know, a couple days later, she called us up to say that she had gone back there every single low tide. And she found my security blanket. And here it is. This is like 46 years old. This was, to me, the beginning of the existence of a God in the world. The fact that this came back to me. So, I think a lot of our study of the Bible is studying evidence of God and Jesus. Man, for me, this is all I needed. So, I just wanted to end with some musings about what this all means. One is not good. One is this question that I think we're all asking right now, which is, how can God oversee a world where people are using guns and bombs to kill each other in His name? Okay, that it just does not seem consistent. But if you listen to the readings from Matthew, this is not new. This is not new. The idea of young children being killed out of fear and power, this is not new. This has always been part of the human existence and its relationship to God. I don't have an answer. Some higher power is going to have to answer that one. And when somebody like Mr. Allen lost his life, you have to wonder. You do have to wonder what's going on. But as it relates to this blanket, I think I was ready to believe that there was a God, that God had turned, like Poseidon, had turned the waves and had gotten the water to bring my black blanket back to the beach. Like that was what God did. But as I've been living with this more and more, my grandmother was a very pious person. And I don't think that God turned the tides. I don't think he made my blanket come back there. I think that probably just the currents kind of shifted around and my blanket came back. The presence of God was probably in my grandmother. The fact that she had the hope every low tide to go back half an hour away to this beach because she knew how much I needed that blanket. That was the presence of God in that moment, as I've come to think about it. And the third thing is this, as it relates to the tooth fairy. I've been wondering whether we do our kids a disservice by creating these mythical creatures, the tooth fairy and the Easter bunny. I wonder if we're training them to be skeptical about what their parents tell them, and whether, in fact, it makes it harder for them to understand a relationship with God later on in their life. But then I've been thinking more that maybe it actually helps, and I think it helped me. And I'll tell you why. I think it was because I had this gradual exposure to these things, Santa Claus and Easter Bunny, right? And I learned the difference between believing something and believing in something. And to me, there's an enormous difference. I think I believe in what I see and what I hear. I believe what logic tells me to be true, or if you can't prove something to be true, what's, statistically significant. I'll believe that. And I believe things that happen to me. But to believe in something, I think it's very different. I think it's an action. You believe in something that you're taking a step. It's an action. It's not passive like believing. It's an action. And I think when we believe in something, you're placing your hope, your belief, your trust in somebody else. So I think I can believe in things whose existence are sort of beyond my senses. I think that's okay, and I've come to grips with that. I can believe, for example, even here, in this day and age, I can believe in our democratic voting system even while the front runner says things that I just can't believe he's saying. I can believe in a student even while that student is making up some crazy excuse about how their homework got flushed down the toilet or whatever. Okay? These are very different things. When we believe in you, it's very different than believing you. And I was thinking that actually believing and believing in are quite analogous to what we talk about in our school motto. To be rather than to seem to be. To seem to be appeals to our senses of sight and of hearing and believing something. Whereas essay is to be, to believe, and we believe in what people are. So, at this time of year, as we all get ready to head off to celebrate our respective holidays this time of year with our families and so forth, I just want to say that after all these years, I do believe in Santa Claus. Thanks very much.